Hi, I'm Pierre Saint-Jean. I was a prof for decades teaching college freshmen psychology, especially cognitive psychology. And I learned a lot from my students, especially from their questions, and especially from the questions I couldn't answer, like, I'll get back to you on that next week. And then I go home and do my research. But when I wasn't doing that, when I get home, I'd take off my professor's suit and put on my Team Canada t-shirt and go down to the gym where I was a sports psychologist working with some of the Canada's national teams and individual athletes and the junior teams. And I learned a lot. But when I wasn't doing that, every 4 years I would take off on a 6 month sabbatical to Asia and spend time as a itinerant yogi, hanging out in Tibetan monasteries and yoga ashrams and Zen Buddhist temples. And this time I was asking the questions and learned a lot there. I was fortunate. I'm really grateful for all the learning opportunities that I had. And in due course, those learnings began to merge, and I realized that it's an old expression, same but different, that these are different times, different places, totally different conceptual frameworks. But yet at their core, there's a similarity. They share common characteristics, and it's those common characteristics that we're going to call the high plateau. So what is this high plateau, and what does it mean for you? Well, I'll let the professor explain. The high plateau experience is shared by elite athletes, by Buddhist practitioners, and by you, because you've been there. If we go inside your mind and retrieve episodes from your long-term memory where you were so focused, you lost track of time, you lost your inhibitions, you were oblivious to distractions, you lost your self-consciousness, and at the same time you're alert and in the moment. And that moment could be like here and now, or in the present, where you're practicing your trade, you're honing your skills, you're active and doing things in your environment. You're painting the Mona Lisa or you're folding laundry. It's not what you do, it's the space that you do it from. If you're folding laundry because it's a chore, it's something to be gotten out of the way with so you can get on to something else. That's called the hurry up syndrome, where you're always in a hurry and you're physically tight and you're mentally uptight, as opposed to doing the same thing, folding laundry from that high plateau state where you're watching the activity happening and you get to see the elegance and the grace of that elusive triple fold. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be drinking beer mindfully, at least the first couple. And those moments don't have to be outside here and now. They can be inside here and now in your mind when you're working on plans or projects, problem solving by using your working memory. Cognitive psychologists call it being in the flow, or just flow, hanging out with friends, easy exchanges, comfortable. And athletes call it the zone, that moment in sports where you're so fast, no thoughts, pure action. And at the same time, you're calm, detached, watching the whole thing happen. These are precious moments. As Pavlov would say, these ring a bell because you've been there, they're in there. So your homework, or part of your homework, is to go in there and retrieve at least 3 episodes where you were in that space and write them down, as much detail as you can recall. Who was there, what was happening? Because later on, what you'll be able to do is to bring these back and bring that feeling, bring that space back into your mind. And at the end of the course, you're not going to get a diploma, but what you can expect is to have the concepts and the skills that you need to spend more time on that high plateau. So the high plateau can be a pretty exciting place, and what we're going to do in the course is to give you the concepts and the skills you need to change into something that will spend more time on that high plateau. And the advantage of a course like this, of a hybrid course, is that all 3 of these psychologies have concepts and skills that are useful. And the first concept we're going to look at is from cognitive psychology, and it's called a schema. The best way to think about a schema is it's like an app. Like if you want to do something new with your computer or your phone, you get an app, and that app will let you go places you couldn't go to before and let you do things you couldn't do before. So think of a schema as an app for your mind brain, and what it does is it allows you to to understand things you didn't understand before, and to do things you couldn't do before, like spending more time on that high plateau. So how do schemas work, and what does that have to do with change? Well, we'll let the professor explain after this brief message. When you learn how to ride a bike, it's really difficult. I mean, how does this thing stay up, and how do you turn? How do you pedal? Your mind is really focused and working really hard, and you're sweating, but gradually you learn how to do it. You learn the component responses that allow you to do that. So you can say that what you're doing is you're building your bicycle riding schema. You're building up the collection of little responses, and you're putting them together into a plan, if you like, or a strategy that becomes automatic, so that after a while you don't have to concentrate on it. You can let your mind wander, and your brain will do the driving for you. So you got yourself what we call a motor schema. It lets you motor along, right? This kind of thing. But where are you going to go? Right. So you need another schema, a sensory schema that will make sense out of where you are. It's like a map of your neighborhood. So gradually you learn where the Quickie Mart is, and where that is, and where that is. But eventually you've got a map, and you've got all the different locations that you can go to on your bicycle. So when you combine a sensory schema with a motor schema, in this case your neighborhood and riding a bicycle, you have a way of dealing with the environment you didn't have before, and you can do it easily because it's all built in, it's all in there. And when we socialize, what we do is we acquire schemas, both sensory and motor. If you remember when you were two, probably not, but still. Yeah, when you were two, you just, you're learning how to walk. You got the muscles are all joined together, and the schema for walking is in action. And wow, what a big opportunity! Much better than crawling on the floor. And you learn things like there's a sensory schema called a door, and you watch people, and you see that what they do is they can use the door to go beyond where you can normally go. So you have a sensory schema. This is a door, this is a handle, this is a knob. And you have a motor schema, pretty simple. Reach, grab, rotate, and pull, and away you go. What freedom! It's amazing, right? You can not only walk, but you can open doors and do things. So for the rest of your life, that's what you do: is you accumulate sensory schemas and motor schemas to help you deal with to help you adapt with the world as it is. So you learn from your parents, you learn from your teachers, you learn from your friends, you learn from the media. You build up all these schemas that eventually become you, and that's what you are today, is that specific collection of schemas that you acquired as you evolved, as you develop in your family and your culture. Um, uh, of all the creatures on this planet, we are the least our evolutionary genes and the most our cultural schemas, and that makes us the lucky ones. Because if your future is an open book, you get to write it. So this course is like that. It's like an agent of change, except it's not your parents or your teachers or something external to yourself. You're going to learn how to change yourself. So you're going to be your own agent of socialization. And you can not only change yourself into something that spends more time on the high plateau, you can change yourself into anything you want. You can change it to something more comfortable if you want. Okay, pop quiz. All right, two questions. There are quizzes in this course. Two questions, one hard, one easy. In a moment, I'm going to put two numbers up on the screen. And what I want you to do is to add those two numbers. They're two-digit numbers. And do this because we're going to debrief, and it's going to help you understand how your mind works a little better. Okay, so 6 seconds, and starting now. Stop. Rewind back to when the numbers came up on the screen. What did you do? If you're like me, when you're in school, I learned how to add up the numbers on the right-hand column and carry something, if anything, and then add up the other column, and that's how you do sums. What that is a series of steps or a series of operations And it's a motor schema, and that's what a motor schema is. It's a sequence of steps, a sequence of operations. So you can open doors externally, like reach, grab, rotate, and pull, or you can open doors internally. That is, you can use schemas to have experiences, to open doors, to have experiences you didn't have before, and to do things you couldn't do before. That's the whole purpose of the course, is to acquire those schemas. So that's what we're going to do. So yeah. So take home questions. I'm going to put up two words on the screen. And I want you to decide which of those words is a sensory schema and which of those words represents a motor schema. You ready? Here are the words: mindfulness and meditation. Now, take this question home. Think about it. Think about the other question at home too. Like, look inside your mind. Start doing that and see what's happening. Are you carrying out operations, or is your mind just drifting off? Your mind is drifting off about half the time. So start doing a little introspection to see how your mind works. And as the course develops, we'll make that more refined, more detailed for you, so you can see more of what's happening in there. So that's your homework. So what's next? What's next? Well, next steps. And we'll let the professor explain that after this brief message. So far, we've taken the first look at high plateau moments, and we've taken the first look at schemas. You have to understand schemas if you're going to understand your mind. So now that you know that, what are you going to do? What's your next step? Well, the next step is to take a look at the course outline, or as we like to call it here, the course schema. Ta-da! So it's a sensory schema because it shows components, and those little arrows show the relationship between those components. And that's what a sensory schema does: components and the relationship between them, how they tie together. You probably noticed that the components are shrouded. Let me explain something. I was doing a workshop in Vancouver on how to work the late evening shift. So I had bartenders and chefs and nurses and policemen. I had two strippers from a local burlesque club. It was an interesting mix of people. I had lots of fun. So I did my thing. I showed my PowerPoint. Here's the 6 things about deep sleep, and here's the 5 things about taking naps. And at the end of the course, Sophie, one of the strippers, came up and she said, "Pierre, you give good workshop." She talked that way. She said, "Pierre, you give good workshop, but you shouldn't show everything at once. You have to make them curious. You have to make them think about what's coming up next." Actually, she said what's coming off next, but the same idea. So this is the origin of the burlesque theory of education. And if you want to know what's going to happen next, who better to introduce you to the course than the professor himself? So let's go over to the course screen. And the first shroud we're going to remove is the intro lecture shroud. That's where you are now. And the lectures here are similar to lectures you may have experienced in school before. Same, but different. They're different in that A, they're short. They're less than half an hour long. And B, there are a few of them, maybe a couple of hours worth at most. And it's a targeted course. It's a focus course. And the target here is for you to be able to spend some time on the high plateau. It's not going to be a long time initially. You're not going to go for long walks in that high plateau, but hey, maybe you'll be able to take a few steps after you finish the course. That's the target. That's the objective. And the amount of time you need to get there is 2.5 hours. So the core part is the couple of lectures and the first lab. And the first lab is basic breath. My first monastic experience was Indian monastery, where the teacher said something like, this was in the 80s, so a lot of drugs were happening. So he said, you guys have lots of drugs and they take you to various places. Well, for those places that you go to on drugs, we have ways of breathing that will take you there. And we have ways of breathing that will take you places that drugs won't take you. And he then proceeded to make his point in the next 100 days. It was really interesting. So you're not going to be like a perfect Buddha after a couple of hours course, But you'll be able to spend a few moments on that high plateau. You'll be able to get a sample, and once you get a sample, it's kind of addictive. You want to go back to it and experience it some more. So you'll be able to go in greater depths in the course because there's lots of other things happening. But the core part of the course is very quick, 2.5 hours. If you don't do the homework. If you do the homework, well, it's a lifetime because at the end of the course, if everything works out, that and you'll be able to spend time on that high plateau every day. It's going to change you so that you're a different being after that. That's the whole purpose of the course, is to acquire a new skill. You need the skills like breathing and other skills, and you need the concepts. And the first concepts we're going to look at now in lecture 2 are the new mind and the old brain. And the new mind is new. It's been around for 50,000 years or so, about the time we got language. And your old brain is like really old. It's been around for millions of years. It's been shaped by natural selection until now it's hardwired. And it's hardwired for one thing, and that's survival. That's why it has the fight or flight response, so that, yeah, when the saber-toothed tiger comes along, you can run really quick or you can fight and survive. But there aren't too many saber-toothed tigers around, and the old brain is still focused on that. It's still scared of things. It's still looking for trouble. That's its thing. So you can't fight or flight all the time. I mean, you're going to burn out within a few minutes. It takes just too much energy. But there's the younger sibling of fight and flight, and that's a fuss and fret. And the old brain just loves to fuss and fret about things that really don't matter. It fusses and frets about things it can't do anything about. That's its nature. It fusses and frets. That's those fussing and fretting. That's what we call brain farts. When you see a brain fart, what you want to do is let's go someplace else. And that someplace else could be breathing, or it could be focusing on something else. Did I say focusing? Third lecture, we're going to look at high plateau schema. And the high plateau schema has 6 elements, 2 for each of your mind, your old brain, and your body. The mind's embedded, they're all interrelated. The mind's embedded in the brain's embedded in the body's embedded in the planet's embedded in the universe, but we're not going to deal with those last 2. We're going to focus on the first 3. And for each of those 3, there are 2 components in the high plateau schema. And maybe you can guess the first component for mind is focus. We talked about that earlier in the course, in this lecture. Your mind has to be focused. It's probably the most important part of the high plateau. It's the most important part of your life. I mean, everything that happens to you is a result of your focus, your intentional focus. There's nothing else in the universe that you can control. Is your intentional focus. That's it, right? So we're going to focus on that quite a bit. But we'll also take a look at some of the other components, like a brain component is that your brain has to feel safe. If it feels threatened, it's hard to be on the high plateau. The high plateau is a very pleasant, comfortable place. You can't be comfortable if you're scared. So we're going to look at ways to make sure that the brain feels safe and so on. And I guess Sophie would say, show at least one more thing. We're going to take a look at a body component. And that component is that your body is loose. Not morally, just physically loose. Not relaxed. There's relaxed where right? There's loose where one athlete, tennis player, referred to it as a sensation of readiness to respond. He says, my muscles are tight, I can't move quickly enough. I can't respond well enough. They're too relaxed. I don't care. But if I'm loose, I'm ready to respond. So if the ball goes to my backhand, I automatically go there without like forcing my muscles to overcome the opposing muscles and so on. So there are ways to loosen up the muscles. So that's the third component. If you want the other 3, you take the rest of the course. So that's the lectures. What else is there? Well, from the intro lecture, there are 3 ways to go. One is the lab, one is the lecture series itself, and the other one over there are what we're calling the standalone lectures. We call them quickies, actually, because most of them are short, like a couple of minutes, and that's it. And they're basically the same format as the main lecture, so it's like what you might have experienced before. So we'll try to keep you entertained and keep you curious. We're gonna tell you stories. We're gonna show graphs and PowerPoints and picture in picture, and stuff like that. And we're going to go off on tangents once in a while, and but we'll bring stuff back so it's relevant to what the course is all about. So yeah, stories, parables, jokes. I got lots of jokes. Uh, some of them funny, except the Zen ones, because many don't have a punchline. Um, what was the Zen chicken thinking about as it crossed the road? It was thinking about crossing the road. I told you it wasn't funny. But it'll be relevant later on when we look at mindfulness and present-centeredness. So the lab's a different kind of place. It's different than the lectures. In the lectures, you learn about sensory schemas or concepts. While in the labs, you learn about motor schemas or skills. And the best place to go to learn about how you acquire skills is in the gym. So we're going to use a gym analogy, partly because the people who spend most of their time working on skills are athletes and coaches. That's what they do all day, every day. So we're going to use a lot of sports psychology. So the gym analogy applies in a number of different ways. One way is that your intentional focus is it's like a muscle in the sense that if you exercise it, it gets stronger. And the analogy works even further. It's like a muscle, it can get tired. After a day of, say, studying hard or working hard on a project, and your brain just goes blah, because you're accumulating something called glutamate in your prefrontal cortex, in your lateral prefrontal cortex right here, and it sort of burns you out. So you need time to recover, and that's why you should never play volleyball right after a 2-hour Vipassana meditation. It'll affect your serve and stuff like this. So the analogy works well, and what we're going to do is help you to strengthen that intentional focus by giving you mental push-ups, exercises that will help you be able to focus more easily and for longer periods of time. That's what we're going to do in the lab. So in this exercise, you're going to use your intentional focus to change your breath. And one of the reasons we use breath, well, every tradition uses breath, but one of the reasons they do that is that breath is one of the objects of focus that you could use to change your blood chemistry, depending on the rhythm of the breathing. And if you can change your blood chemistry, you can change your brain chemistry. If you can change your brain chemistry, you can change your mind. So it's a loop. It starts here and goes all the way around. So the technique is called diaphragmatic breathing or abdominal breathing or belly breathing. We're going to call it belly breathing because the others are really hard to say. But if you want more info on how to do it, just go to YouTube and search for belly breathing. So it works this way. At the bottom of your torso is a diaphragm muscle. Focus your mind now on that little muscle at the bottom. So just pull it in and let the air out. Pull it in and let the air out. Do that a couple of times. Like, get a good feel for that muscle as you pull it in. And while you're doing that, I'm going to try and distract you to make it more challenging. So I'm going to do lots of things. I'm going to keep talking. I'm going to tell you some of my better jokes perhaps. But whenever you find that your mind is drifting off your breathing, breathe. Focus on pulling it in and just let it out. Letting it out is more of a passive. You just gradually relax that muscle and the air breathes out. So what you're going to do is you're going to do a rhythm and breathe. Keep focusing. What you're going to do is use a rhythm where it's in 2 and out 3. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Do that, right? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Keep breathing. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Doesn't matter. You can go 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I wouldn't do that one a lot. But you get the idea is that it's the ratio of in and out that matters. And in almost all cases, for at least this type of exercise, the out breath is longer than the in breath. So you could do like a 3, 4 if you like. Okay, breathe. Still doing it? Keep at it. And the other thing that happens is as you keep doing that day after day, that's a real muscle. That muscle actually gets stronger. So you find yourself that you can inhale more deeply, more comfortably, and so on. And that affects the way you interact with your environment. Breathe. All right. Focus on breathing. That's what you're supposed to do right now. Just keep focusing on breathing, on pulling it in. So most of these breathing exercises have four numbers associated with it. The first of the four numbers is the number of the in-breath. Second number is how long you hold that breath in. The third number is how long you breathe out. And the fourth number is how long you hold it out. And in this case, the breathing technique you're now using is a 2-0-3-0. So in 2 and then out 3, but you don't hold at the top or at the bottom. Uh, if you want to make it interesting, try 4780 for a couple of minutes and bang. It's a pretty powerful technique. Don't start with that, right? Start with this and do this as much as you can. How long do you do that? Try for 30 seconds. That's about, what, 5, 6 breaths or more or less. Give yourself a 30-second pause in your day. If you can't find a 30-second pause in your day, then you better hire someone to manage your life because you're not doing a very good job if you can't find those 30 seconds. So, focus, breathe, keep breathing. So, 30 seconds. And before you come out and before you stop your focusing, is consider what you're going to do next. So, you're focusing on breathing in, but as you let the air out, you can change your focus to something else. As a matter of fact, I would encourage you to do that. Like, listen to me as you're breathing out. Because the idea is not to stay focused all the time on both in and out breath, it's to go for that first breath. Once you do that first breath, then the second one follows, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and then whatever else comes after that. We'll look at that in the labs because there's lots more you can do. So, so focus, breathe, still breathing. You getting better at it? You feeling okay? Again, if you feel dizzy, stop and let your old brain take over. Most of your life, that's most of the breathing is done by the old brain. And now what you're doing is you're using your mind to control your breath, which you rarely do. It's like, you're in an airplane, you're a pilot, and all your life you've been on automatic pilot, and then you decide, okay, I'll grab this joystick and I'll start steering. So intentional focus, that's what you're doing. You're intentionally focusing on your breath. Are you? Yeah, focus on your breath. So on your out breath, what you're going to do is a couple of things. And one of the things you want to do is your homework. Remember that? The high plateau moments. You should have 3 high plateau moments. Write them down, make them detailed so that the image is clear. So that when you breathe in, as you breathe out, just focus on one of those high plateau moments. And don't worry too much about like spending a couple of breaths on that high plateau as long as you return after a little while to your in-breath, to pulling it in and then letting it out and focusing on something else. You can focus on what's happening around you. So as you breathe out, 1, 2, 3. So as you breathe out, you go 1, 2, 3. You focus on 3 different things. Then you go back and you breathe. You pull the air in. The other thing you can do is when you breathe out, you can consider the impermanence and interconnectedness of ongoing reality. A little Zen moment, a little mindfulness moment, and then focus on your breath again. And keep doing that whenever the opportunity arises. Find those 30-second moments in your life. The best time to do it is really when you catch yourself fussing and fretting, ruminating, and you're someplace you don't really want to be. Well, come out and do your breath and do your external focus. Again, focus on what's happening around you, on reality as it's unfolding before your very eyes. That's it for lecture 1. May your days be filled with high plateau moments. Have a good trip. Bon voyage.